I'm Tony Lockwood, founder of Thompson Wright Partners, and I'm delighted to welcome you to the latest edition of the Inside Track podcast, where I discuss business transformation journeys with leading figures in industry. Today I'm joined by Alex Neame, a scientist with military background who has applied the core philosophies of science and the leadership approach gained within the Army to massive success in transforming operations within UK industry. He has some really interesting perspectives that I'm sure you'll be able to adapt and adopt in your transformation journeys. So let's welcome Alex. Hi Alex, really great to have you on the podcast today, and thank you for agreeing to contribute. Is it worth sort of starting off talking a little bit about the roles that you've done and the challenges that you've had to overcome in each of them?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I'll start with what I've done, and then you can kind of select what you want to do. I trained initially as a scientist. I moved into the British Army, take a platoon of fairly experienced soldiers and convert them from a light role, so they'd been kind of foot soldiers, into a kind of armoured role, which was quite a challenge. Yeah. I did an MBA. I moved into the world of oil and gas. So I spent 7 years working for Schlumberger, who had set up a consulting arm, trying to solve business problems for a large variety of international clients. And then finally, most recently, I've been at Centrica. And the last 3 years, I've been at British Gas working on kind of very major transformation programs, including the digital transformation, including a kind of enormous outsourcing deal, and also the operating model, changing the operating model for the Hive connected home business unit.
Right. Interesting. How does a scientist then go into the British Army? What was the rationale for that?
As you said, it's an interesting career choice. For me, it was a question of taking my training, which had been very, very theoretical up to that point, and trying to get a bit of practical application and practical learning. Scientists aren't particularly known for making swift, bold, rapid decisions. Army officers are.
Right. In two early elements of your career, what were the sort of key things that you were able to sort of take from those experiences that have allowed you to be successful in sort of the transformation world as you've developed your career?
I think science is very much around framing a problem and doing analysis to give you the correct course of action and make decisions. And that's clearly important at the beginning of a project or program. There's often a lot of pressure to get stuck in and fix things, but if you haven't done your analysis right, and you don't structure the program in the right way, you won't have the results you want. In terms of the Army, it's very much around decision making and balancing risk and reward. And again, programmatics is all about that. You've got to structure something. There's always going to be an element of risk, but depending on the consequences and the context you're in, you might want to dial down or dial up the risk you're ready to take. So I suppose, analysis, structuring, and decision making is this kind of science and Army takeaways.
Right. I've worked with a lot of ex-forces, so senior people within ex-forces, and I'm always really, really impressed by their ability to communicate and their ability to get people behind them. And I understand where that comes from, but it'd be interesting just to get your sense on that sort of. I've had some friends, and one of the things that they were saying is that it is that sort of command and control type of scenario, but actually just telling someone to do it and when you put them in danger is not good enough. You've almost almost got to build that sort of that teamwork. I can't remember what the terminology is that they were using, but it's always sort of held them in really good stead for future careers.
Yeah, I think there's a couple of different elements there. The Army is the only organisation where I've worked where the single thing that is talked about every single day is leadership. In business, people talk about leadership, more or less regularly. In the Army, it's not just every day; it's every minute of every day. Mm-hmm. So it's a quality that's highly prized in the Army, that every level you're trained in. There's a whole load of material and resource and feedback about leadership. So I think culturally, it's this, it's an extraordinarily important value to military people. Some organizations have very different approaches to leadership, very flatter pyramids, less belief in micromanaging. Others have more, and I don't believe the training you get in the army is not applicable to all those environments. It's just how you manifest it.
Yes, yeah. So when you moved into Schlumberger, you'd ended up going back into quite stressful scenarios and being in countries where stuff was going on around you. So what do you do to sort of alleviate that stress, get away from it all? What clues or what help can you offer up for people who are, transformation programs change, people say stressful, but it's nothing like, as you say, being in those combat situations or in those situations that stuff's going on all around you. So what do you do to sort of get away from it all and chill out and get back into the zone?
It's a great question. I mean, first of all, before you go into a situation like that, you want to be prepared for it, and no soldier's going to kind of turn up on day one and get chucked into Kabul. There's a whole load of training and thinking you do before you go into that kind of situation. Secondly, when you're in there, I think you need to be very clear about your purpose. So knowing what your purpose is and why you're enduring whatever it is you're enduring makes everything a lot easier. I mean, if you are having a dreadful time and everything's difficult and you don't really see the point in it, that's a totally different circumstance to knowing exactly what you want and taking a bit of pain to get the reward at the end. The other couple of elements that are useful, I find, is to have some kind of emotional release. I had a colleague in transformation programs who used to watch EastEnders and cry at it. That wasn't my idea. That wasn't the kind of release I felt.
That's even more stressful.
So I like to do outdoor activities. I really love getting outdoors into the hill, ideally walking and biking and climbing. And I find kind of focusing in your mind on a different type of problem.
Yes.
Good way of getting away. And the final thing that's useful to do is have a support network, and whether it's friends and family or whether it's colleagues, it's really important to talk about the experience you're having with people who can listen sympathetically, but also sometimes challenge me back a bit and help remind you of your purpose. And ideally you kind of do all those things together, and you go out into the hills with friends and have a bit of a whinge, and they tell you to man up and refreshed.
Yes, absolutely. It's interesting that so many people that you talk to, that getting back to nature is their release. Whether it's walking, whether it's going up in the hills, whether it's going out on the bikes, whatever. But it's all, as you say, getting back into nature. And I think too many people forget about that. So obviously change is constant these days, and highly competitive market conditions, disruptive technologies sort of being launched day in, day out. And so the face of traditional business models having to massively change as new entrants come in and shake up the market. What would you say, in your experience, have been sort of the vital steps that any organisation that's going through transformation needs to take? What sort of framework would you suggest?
I think the first thing is to acknowledge the disruption, acknowledge that change is constant, because every organisation gets to a point where it has to change and where it will change, and embracing that and seeing the opportunities is the first step. I guess programmatically, it's really important to understand your requirements for any reaction you're going to have. You've got to set your requirements. I've been on remediated programs that have kind of been trying to do the right thing, but it's not clear what good looks like or what the outcome and benefits required are. So very first thing in your frameworks, to set the benefits you want, the outcomes the programs are going to deliver, and the outputs the projects are going to deliver to achieve that. The second thing is once you've got your target set up, it's putting your structure in place. So your governance, your roles and responsibilities, making sure you've got the right resources and tools to do what you're going to deliver. And the third thing, once you've done that, is to get your baseline set and have your monitoring equipment set up.
Right.
Because if you want to have any degree of agility, you want to be testing and learning as you go along. And as you make a change, is it having the effect you want? Do you stop? Do you continue? Do you modify your approach? So those three things for me have always, I know it's simple,
yeah,
but you'd be amazed at how often it isn't done well. So setting your requirements, setting up, structuring a program in a kind of clear fashion, and then monitoring and evaluating as you go along, they're critical.
Yeah, and all of those are, as you say, they should be in that sort of formulation process, shouldn't they? This is the way that we set a program up for successful implementation. But all too often, it's that's the grudge work. I just want to get into the detail and let's get into it, and suddenly you're trying to deliver stuff on moving sort of waters, and you can never really understand or determine whether or not you've actually delivered what you set out to deliver.
I think it's that balance between the business imperative and the real genuine desire to make change happen, but sometimes people don't really understand programmatically what you need to run a successful program, and there is a bit of a kicking off and a set piece that feels like admin and wasted time and non-productive time and a sideshow while you're doing it. But when you build a house, you don't see the foundations. But if you haven't built your foundations right, the house probably isn't going to last for too long.
No.
And for me, that initial phase of a project or program, and you can always achieve it within 2 weeks if you get the right attention. That sets up your foundations and enables you to build something successful. Yeah. Otherwise, you're continually re-steering the program, undoing decisions and activities you've made.
And how do you manage your stakeholders, both senior stakeholders and sort of the wider sort of stakeholder group?
It is always challenging. I think even the stakeholders, even your project team, people have different emotional states on different days. They have things going on outside the project and the program. On the project and program, they've got different desires and wants. And then when you layer in the kind of different levels of business unit requirements, politics on top of that, the context of projects working in, it's extraordinarily complex. I mean, for me, I think you have to first stay aware. And you need to know who the key stakeholders are, who are the ones who have influence, who are the ones who have particular influence. Are people positive or negative to what you're trying to achieve? Do they perceive a threat or an opportunity in what you're doing? So first of all, that awareness piece, looking at what the landscape is. Secondly, paying attention to that and being really aware when things change. And and having a stakeholder management plan, of course, but as part of that plan, if something unexpected pops up, you need to interrogate it. Thirdly, having perseverance when that happens. So when you have a problem, it's often an opportunity for a positive conversation.
So can you give us an example of when you've had that sort of challenging stakeholder and how you sort of turn them around, maybe?
Absolutely. I was running an operational transfer. So an oil and gas asset that was not financially performing like we wanted. We decided we'd take it in-house. We'd outsource the operations and maintenance. I pulled my team together and I said, right, this is what we're going to do. We've got 6 months. We've got to do this transfer. And my HSE rep said, it can't be done. So this is the very first meeting, and this kind of, as the meetings went on, I kind of louder and more firmly said, this will happen. And she said, no, it won't. And it was a fairly, unconstructive conversation. And I was annoyed because I felt she was being obstructive, and she was annoyed because she felt that I was taking risks, an operational transfer of an asset, volatile hydrocarbons, think Piper Alpha.
Yeah.
There is all kinds of risk. So we're getting frustrated with each other. The turning point came when we decided to actually dig into what the problem was. if we manage the operation and maintenance ourselves, it gives us a lot more control, not only over the cost, but also over the safety. And she said, but it's not me that's going to stop it. It's the HSE authority, because we've got outstanding audit items on this asset. And together we kind of worked out, actually, by taking it in-house, the reason we had the outstanding items was because the previous contractor we hadn't been able to control them. They hadn't done it.
Right, yeah.
So we kind of worked out that we could go to the HSE and say, look, we've got an opportunity here. We think we can resolve these issues. We can run the asset in a safer way if we take it in-house. And can we have your approval to do that? Because part of the reason that she was concerned the HSE would block it is that they just wouldn't approve it because of the risk. But we were able to work together and with the HSE, as it turned out, to show them that there was a positive here. Right. So we've been in kind of, it's almost like you sometimes find yourself in violent agreement.
Yes.
Initially, this can't be done. It then became when you get into detail of why can't it be done, it's kind of, you see actually that there's the opportunity there. And then when you start collaborating, it can be done.
But an element of getting into their shoes, isn't it? And understanding what the situation is from their perspective, and what the issues are, and what the concerns are. And some are absolutely valid, but once you know those, you can actually start to do something about it. Equally, there's other occasions I've had experience of where the challenges or issues that they're having weren't valid, but you can do something about that as well.
Absolutely. It comes down to the facts. And again, back to this analysis. And when you actually, the more precise you can be when you talk about the problem, it can't be done. Well, okay, that's a problem. It can't be done because I don't believe the HSE will approve it. And you kind of go down your, 5 whys. Well, why? Because, we've already got outstanding actions. Why? Because the maintenance hasn't happened. Why? Because we can't control the contractor. Yeah. So why what we're asking you to do is change the contractor. So you can link it together. It's also part of that change curve. No one, we all normalize our environments, and we all know that change takes a toll on us. You've got to get over the bow wave before you can start kind of moving forward. And so every time you do change, individually and collectively, you have to go through the stages of kind of denial, anger, kind of bargaining, and hit your rock bottom, and then come back up the side and see the hope and delivery. And this HSE rep and I went through that journey.
Right. In terms of engaging the sort of wider team, what do you do that? What sort of ideas or thoughts do you have about how that works successfully for you?
I mean, I'm a really big fan of regular one-to-one meetings with the more senior stakeholders. You tend to not find space in their diary unless you block it in advance. And one of the programs I was involved in, we were setting up a big decommissioning program, and it wasn't, there were layers and layers of teams. There were contractors, there were different business units, there were different parts of our business units, and the project manager came up with the great idea of launching something called One Team. And in the principle, I believed in, we're going to be one team, we're going to have contracts and everyone in the same room. But I said, well, the practicalities of it, it's a, half a day meeting every month for 50 people, the practical it's expensive. It's going to be a waste of time and money. It's not going to achieve what we want. And I was proved totally wrong.
Yeah.
And Will was fantastic. He stood out in front of everyone. He said, this is why we're doing it. And I realized that and we all know it, but it was just another data point showing, he had different conversations, different connections with people than I did.
Yeah.
And in this forum, we could address certain things, and in other forums, we address different things, and individually and collectively. A program, you never have this direct, flick a switch and something happens on the ground. It's always about nudging and influence and navigating.
One of the things that we've done successfully are these daily stand-ups. 10-15 minutes in the morning, 5 minutes in the afternoon, just to ensure that everybody's in the same place in terms of what the priorities are, what the focus is for today, and then coming back at the end of the day, have we done it? What are the barriers? What do we need to resolve? What do we need to get out of the way for tomorrow? And that just starts to really build up the momentum really, really quickly. And people they've got a feeling that they've got a place to voice any concerns that they have. And it doesn't sort of fester. Then people get into the swing of it, and they do voice their issues. And you just get into as we were saying earlier, right into the detail really early on in the process.
And for me, that's I mean, I agree entirely. It's SOPs. I mean, any project or program, there's not a daily kind of stand up for the team, for the immediate team.
Yeah.
That's a project or program I'd be concerned about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Jolly good. I see also that you're involved in Team Rubicon. Tell me about that. I was quite intrigued to see what it was about.
They're fantastic. They're so the idea is that it's international disaster relief, and what they're trying to do is use both veterans from the military, so there's a kind of military link and military influence, but also local communities and people who just want to get stuck in and help. What they're particularly good at is basic organisation and training and briefing, so they can work within a team. And I love that whole idea of in a very lean and agile way, having an event, taking the resources you've got and giving them the kind of minimum of training to make people effective. What they're also brilliant at is on some of the kind of more serious international incidents, they'll send out reconnaissance parties to do situational analysis and work out how to solve it. So back to this passion of mine of kind of situational awareness, analysing and scoping a solution.
Brilliant, really good. And as you say, so many of those areas that has been covered within Rubicon, absolutely transferable into your day-to-day job as well. Where you're bringing people together with a common aim on some projects. People want to get involved, and actually they just need to be guided in the right way.
It is fantastic. I mean, I would say the skills you can learn for something like that are they're life skills that we've been.
Oh, great, brilliant. So to sort of finish off, if you are to boil down your sort of whole experience into one sort of core takeaway for the listeners today, what would that be?
And I think it's something that I arrived at early on and I've been refining as I go. And the first thing is, if you fail to plan, you plan to fail. You've always got to have a plan. You know, the second thing is plans are nothing and planning is everything. It's
interesting, and I just want to sort of pull you back a little bit. Absolutely, totally agree with fail to plan to fail. What do you classify as a plan?
Oh, well, a plan is you've got to have an objective. You want to work out what you want to do, and you've got to have some schema to get towards that objective.
Yeah.
You've got to know your purpose, and now that purpose can change. Your plan will change, because the second bit of wisdom is plans are nothing and planning is everything. It's not the plan you have, you will never deliver exactly.
No, absolutely.
Always modify that plan based on what happens in reality and if your objectives change. So the third piece of advice, which I guess maybe that's the one that's absolutely critical, it's the US Marine Corps motto: improvise, adapt, overcome.
Right.
You know, whatever happens, you've got to be persistent and you find a way through. You improvise, adapt, overcome to achieve your objective. But that on its own, that's why I like to say that, you know, failing to plan is failing to fail. If you don't have an objective, if you haven't had some kind of plan, you can do all the improvising, adapting you want. You
don't know which direction you're going to go in.
Yeah.
Great. No, that's really good. I like that a lot. Well, it's really great. Thank you very much for your time and your insights, Alex. We occasionally get some questions asking for clarification on some of the points that you raised. If I sort of coordinate that, are you happy to respond?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm really passionate about project and program management. I'm really passionate about solving problems. I love coaching and training people, and as it happens at the moment, I'm running a couple of little projects, one of which is with Rubicon, and it's around how we can extend the the training that we give volunteers and give a more general leadership training. So
great.
Hopefully we'll have capacity to answer plenty of questions.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much, and speak soon.
Really nice to meet you.
Brilliant. Cheers,
Bye.
Alex. So what is your one takeaway from this episode with Alex? I'm intrigued to learn more about Rubicon, so we'll look to schedule another session with Alex and hopefully some of the Rubicon team to explore how their approach can help you to deliver transformation within your organisation. If you wish to learn more before then, I'll put a link to their website in the show notes. Once again, thank you, Alex. And I'll hopefully see you again in a couple of weeks. Bye for now.